Hi, I'm Hannah Durden and you're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. It's your one-stop shop for all things outdoor, child, young person and education related. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm honoured to be joined by Andy Smith and Michael James. Michael is the author of Forest School and Autism, a book that works to fill a gap between forest school practitioners and autistic people and those that support them. Andy is the founder of Spectrum Gaming, a community for autistic young people that works both online and in the Greater Manchester area, including at a forest school site which he leads sessions at. They're both joining us later this year at our Send Outdoors conference, and I'm so pleased they've spared some time from their busy schedules for us today. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Hi,
Thanks for having us.
yeah.
Oh, you know, you're so welcome. I wondered if you could both tell me where you're coming from when we talk about forest school and autistic children and young people. So what's your kind of background and what sparked the passion for you guys?
So for me, for Michael, I've basically worked in all sorts of different roles supporting autistic people for over 20 years now. I started off, so I guess where the passion comes from, I started my career in Brighton. At the time that I was working in Brighton, a lot of the services, both for autistic people and for people with learning disabilities, were really exciting. It was at that time when the whole world was opening up to people, and there was a whole very exciting kind of scene in the services at that time, which was really epitomised by the band Heavy Load, who some people may have heard of. There's a film called Heavy Load, a film about happiness, and the director of that film, Jerry Rothwell, is the guy who's just made the film about The Reason I Jump, which has recently been out in the cinemas. And basically they were a punk band that was people being supported and also support workers. And they were so exciting. They were amazing. And I remember walking into like a learning disability nightclub and seeing them. And that was the moment that, bang, my whole life kind of changed, I guess, without me realizing it until now. It's only when I thought about this question that I kind of, everything I've done since has really been informed by the excitement and the whole ethos that was around at that time. And so
that's all.
Years later, when austerity started to bite and the schools and services that I worked at started to really, we were really feeling the pressure of that, in the same way as the support staff back in Brighton who, happened to like playing in bands, and then some of the people they worked with said we'd love to be in a band, and they all brought it together. So I was somebody who kind of loved being outdoors. Until recently, I lived off grid in the woods. So I kind of had to think, what am I going to do now? Because I'm not sure, a lot of people would find it hard to justify continuing in support work. But I guess because the experience in Brighton that I had that was so intense, and that ethos had been kind of drummed into me, I found it so exciting. I kind of decided that I would start. I discovered Forest School, and I thought that would be a way to bring things that I was already interested in, being outdoors, being in the woods, and actually to open up that opportunity for the people that I was working with at the time.
Oh, awesome. That's an awesome story. What about you, Andy?
Awesome, thank you. So my background actually comes from autism, and then Forest School ended up getting involved later on. Of course, I am autistic, but I struggled quite a lot as an autistic person growing up. So it was quite interesting. So I was very academic. I actually got the best GCSEs in my school out of everyone, but then at the same time, I didn't have any friends when I was at school, any sort of close or meaningful friendships. I was bullied quite a lot, and I felt quite sort of alien from everyone, if that makes sense. It got to the point where I went on to university, and I struggled so much that I ended up sort of dropping out. And then I wasn't actually diagnosed as autistic just yet. And then I got the sort of a triple whammy of an autism diagnosis and being diagnosed with severe anxiety and severe depression. But then I learned that the reasons for those wasn't because I was autistic. People always say anxiety is part of autism, which is a load of nonsense. But because I tried so hard my whole life to sort of fit in and be like everyone else, but I then had the after effects of anxiety and depression from trying to live in a world that wasn't made for me, if that makes sense. And at that point, I sort of struggled so much. I wanted to make it my life goal to make sure as many autistic young people as possible, avoid the struggles my generation and previous generations of autistic people have faced. So I started with just learning as much as I could about autism. And one of the first books which I read at this time was Michael's book, Forest School and Autism.
Awesome.
Yeah, and not just did I love Michael's sort of attitude and approach towards autism itself and how autistic people should be supported, but this was also the first time I'd heard about Forest School. And from reading it, I fell in love with the values and the ethos and sort of everything it stands for. So I sort of reached out to Michael on LinkedIn to tell him how much I loved his book, and we've sort of been in touch ever since. And of course, yeah. And since that moment, it had been my dream to sort of have our own forest school. The original idea was to have one that was Minecraft themed, because I was quite
that's
intense,
awesome.
Yeah, so I was quite an intense gamer. So we spoke at the National Forest School Association conference a few years ago, and I was asking everyone for ideas about how to set up a Minecraft forest school. And then a year later, our forest school started. It's not Minecraft related, but it's yeah, I absolutely love it, and yeah, I think it's I love it with all of my heart, even though. You know, the main point of Spectrum Gaming is gaming. Forest School is compulsory for me, and it always will be because I believe in it so much. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the idea of a Minecraft themed forest school site. I can think of a lot of kids I know that would absolutely love that. I guess what we'll get to the meat of it. Like, what do you guys think it is about forest school that provides such a beneficial environment for autistic learners? I mean, I've got a bit of experience at the outdoors group, but you know, at kind of surface level, so I can think of a few things. But I'd really love to hear from you guys what your experience and thoughts are about the benefit of forest school, like specifically for autistic young people.
I'm happy to go first.
It's a really big question. Sorry.
Thank you. I think for me, one of the main reasons is it's an environment where you can just be yourself, if that makes sense. Like you know, for context, and it's reflected a lot with a lot of our young people. When you're in school, for example, there's always taught that there's sort of one way to be or one way to learn and one way to behave. So you have to sort of sit still and focus on your lessons all day. If you have sensory differences and need movement to stay regulated and you're not allowed to do that, then that makes it a really difficult experience. I'm sensitive to lights, so I find bright lights very distracting, but then I wasn't allowed to wear my hood up in the class setting. So I had this blinding light that I had to go through all day, every day. You have lots of people who can be quite confusing and overwhelming and often not make much sense. And the whole environment, I feel like it's actually set up to fail quite a lot of young people. In our Spectrum Gaming community, about 40% of people are out of school or struggle to access it. And it's quite a shame to see so many people feel sort of stuck because they have to recover from the negative experiences they've had to then have the hope of living a life as a happy autistic person. But then the forest school environment is completely different. It's okay if you need movement, you can climb a tree, you can go on a swing, you can make something. Rather than having an environment where you have to sit still, you're able to sort of express yourself. And you know, if people want to turn around in circles or do whatever they feel like they need to at the time, you're welcome to do that. And of course, it is child-centered as well. So rather than being told what to do and how to do it, you have the freedom to spend that time in a way that works for you. You know, at our forest school, some people just sit in their hammocks and chat for 2 hours, and they absolutely love that experience. Some people make dens, some people like to do big games, but then having the freedom to spend the time in a way that works for you, I think is really, really important. I think society in general is too focused on telling people how to be and how to act, and it sort of you can sort of feel trapped and like you're not really able to do, you know, it's one thing, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I think one thing I really hate is when you have young people who should be able to be quite sort of worry-free and happy and think about their dreams and their future, but then because society expects you to be a certain way, people lose that passion, and I see young people who sort of lose their spark and feel like they can't really be themselves because it's not accepted. I think it's really heartbreaking to see, but environments that work like forest school are the opposite of that and enable that sort of freedom. So yeah,
I agree with everything Andy just said. I think there's something just implicit in the pedagogy where you have that learner-led practice which accepts diversity. It's just a very natural thing. It's reflected as well, isn't it, in the woods? When you go in the woods, trees of the same species aren't all identical. It'd be very odd if you went in a wood and you walked along there's lots of hazel, for instance, and every hazel tree you walk by is exactly the same. That would actually freak you out, right? So so we're seeing diversity reflected around us, you know, when we go into the woods, and so that's just there, like deep within the idea of forest school. So that's one of the things that I think is just kind of that really helps. And the things that Andy said as well, it's about space, isn't it? There's a physical space, so you can move away from things that you might be finding difficult for whatever reason. You move towards the things you like. You have the space to move how you want to. You have the space in time. I think time's a really important thing. Like Andy said, you can just spend a whole session if you want to sat in a hammock talking to somebody. You have the space to kind of, you know, sometimes people just want to do a real info dump, don't they? They just need to tell you all about something they're really interested in, they're really passionate about, and you're able to do that. You know, as long as there's the kind of right number of adults and nobody's setting themselves fire 20 yards away, then you can engage in that. You can enjoy, you know, that's something I've always really enjoyed, is when you get people and they're very passionate and you get that massive info dump. That's fun for me. Do you know what I mean?
I remember telling me all the Lego sets with a certain number. It took about an hour going on. There's this Lego set which is 732, and it's this got this and this, but it's just amazing all the information that you wanted to share. It's great.
And that's like, you know, that's making friends with someone as well, isn't it? And often, you know, the other thing that's really important at forest school is the idea that we're all learners. You know, it's a learning community. So the kind of dynamic and how the practitioners see themselves, how the adults running sessions see themselves, we're learners too. And I think that's a really important kind of dynamic in the sessions, that kind of relationship where there's a flatter kind of power dynamic. And also you're a learning community, aren't you? That's the idea of forest school. We're a learning community. And so sometimes you might be learning stuff that's going to be kind of useful outside. You might be learning about the individual ways that somebody's autism or other aspects of them are, and, you know, ways that can be supported in other places. That's very much part of what's happening. You're learning about that, but sometimes you're learning all about Lego, you know. And for me, when people are moving through the woods and their sensory processing is kind of very different to my own, if I'm observing that as a practitioner, they're often showing me things in the woods that I wouldn't see otherwise, that I wouldn't experience otherwise. There's whole new perspectives, which definitely deepens my nature connection. So that idea that there's a flatter power dynamic, and we're there, you know, you're an authority to the point of view of safety and things, but beyond that, you're kind of, you know, that helps a lot, I think, with a lot of autistic people who find arbitrary authority sometimes difficult.
Yeah, it's more of a community.
Yeah, and the people will respect competence, but if people won't just accept the fact that you're in charge, you've got a particular hat on or something, you know.
Yeah,
I think that is really helpful.
I think in regards to that, the only reason our forest school works is because it does work in that way. Because of course we don't get everything perfect and we make mistakes and get things wrong. But when I speak to a lot of young people, they always feel like a lot of professionals act like they're always right because they've got the authority, so they must be perfect and that sort of stuff. And just having a space where, you know, we can get things wrong, ask young people what we can do better, and then we work together as equal partners to then be able to achieve that. Of course, there's some things young people could do differently during the sessions, but there's a hell of a lot we could do better too. And being able to work together to do that, I think, is it's quite beautiful, I think. But yeah,
it's a really nice ethos, isn't it? Yeah, thinking of, I love that idea of it being, learn a community for everyone. We're all learning all the time.
I've always found it really interesting that when you look at kind of good autism practice, and you'll see phrases being used and kind of approaches being used, and a lot of them are being mirrored almost like coincidentally in forest school practice. I see it like all the time, like things coming up in both, but separately, and from people who don't know anything about the other necessarily. So like the phrase meeting someone where they are, you hear that an awful lot, the forest school practitioners saying that, but you'll also hear that in kind of good autism practice a lot. There's a really good YouTube video by, my mind's gone blank, Dr. Naomi, what's her name?
Fisher.
Fisher, yeah, that was it. Sorry, I had a long day moment. And yeah, Naomi Fisher. If you look it up on YouTube, there's a talk that she did about child-led learning and neurodiversity, and she's nothing, as far as I know, she's nothing to do with the forest school community. And she, if you watch it and coming from a forest school background, you will be really struck by how many things are similar in what she's describing that works really well for neurodivergent people. It's absolutely fascinating. It happens all the time. Like, people talk about flow in both different places. That's talked about a lot. All of these.
So this is a slight aside, but would you tell me about flow? Because I'm a person of many hats, and I do the social media for the company. And I posted something about mindfulness the other day, but it was accompanied with a picture of a child whistling, and someone had commented saying, "Oh, well, I guess flow is a similar state to mindfulness." And I thought, oh, I want to know more about what they mean by flow. Like, I've not heard this phrase before.
So the idea of flow, you see it in chat about it's basically getting in the zone. It's when you do something. It could be kind of sometimes arts and crafts, sports, different kind of things that people do. It could be anything that kind of really, you go into that intense focus.
Okay.
I think. Sorry. I was just going to say, I think one thing for me with mindfulness is, I think a lot of the times people misinterpret what it actually means. So when you hear mindfulness, people normally think of yoga or like relaxing lights and meditation and that sort of stuff. But for me, mindfulness is about that flow. It's about doing whatever it is for you that enables you to stop worrying about what your worries are and the world of escapism. For me, my main thing is playing competitive games on my PC. When I do that, I stop thinking about everything I'm worried and stressed about. And even if I'm having the worst possible day, at that moment, I can forget about it all. I can smile and laugh. I might plunge back into it once I'm done, but then the flow of that moment is what enables you to sort of escape from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I think climbing does that for me, because I can't think of anything else while I'm climbing in case I fall. So you're totally there at the moment, aren't you? There, once you, yeah.
There's a Dr. Damien Milton who's came up like the double empathy problem and mismatch of salience and really good ideas about autism. He talks about flow a lot. He gets in flow playing table tennis. So he's worth kind of checking out for an autistic perspective on flow. And it's kind of tied into ideas around monotropism, which is kind of like a really interesting theory about autism to check out if you work. It's very relevant to kind of forest school. It's really useful. Monotropism. It was Dr. Dinah Murray and some other people came up with that idea, but that's really worth checking out. So yeah, these kind of ideas keep coming up, and so you see flow states at forest school a lot. Sometimes when people are kind of making or doing things. Sometimes there's a guy who comes along to me. He's got a tree that he likes to paint on, and he's somebody who, you know, doesn't often focus on things for ages, but when he starts to do that, it's absolutely self-directed, and he just goes into the zone, and it's quite amazing to watch. And he builds up layers upon layers. There's a kind of sensory aspect he enjoys of it as well, but he builds up layers upon layers, and he's absolutely in the zone in this very kind of focused, calm, happy place. And so I think all of these kind of things that tie together with forest school practice, with kind of good autism practice, it's really interesting how they just so easily. I think it's one of the great strengths of forest schools. It's a pedagogy that can actually fit all these different kinds of people into it in the different ways we are.
Really inclusive, isn't it? I've heard you talk, Michael, about the importance of that. We've just kind of touched on it a little bit when we were talking about what you said, the flatter power structure, didn't you? And about the relationship between the kind of practitioner and the people attending. I've heard you talk about the triangle of trust. Can you tell me a little bit about what that kind of means and why it's so key?
Well, the triangle of trust is an idea from Sarah Knight. I first saw it in the book Forest School for All, and as soon as I read it, it just kind of really resonated with me immediately. I had that kind of light bulbs going off above my head sort of thing going on. And it describes like a three-way relationship between the practitioner, the learner, and the environment. And it's so relevant to the work that I do, and it's so relevant. It's relevant to everybody working in forest school, whatever neurotypes anyone is on the triangle. But I mean, thinking a lot about the relationship with the environment, I think, is really important when you work with people whose sensory processing is different. And to have that kind of as a foundational idea when you're working with people, and also the idea that in order to kind of work together, you need to develop trust, because you can't rush trust, can you? You have to kind of earn it.
Okay.
And that ties back to all the stuff we said about authority. You're not going to be in charge just because you've got the big hat on, you know.
Or the whistle.
Whistle, right? So you need to. You could whistle away all you like, and it's not going to do the trick if you haven't established that trust, that kind of trusting relationship. And it goes with everybody who's coming along, and it kind of layers up, doesn't it, into a community. I think that's one of the things that's really lovely, is when you go off into the woods for all of our sessions and all of our groups, you're building this little community, and that you can look at what are the kind of ethics, what's going to be the foundations of those communities that we build together. And it's kind of things like trust and mutual respect, understanding diversity. These are kind of implicit there in forest school practice, I think. The idea, like we mentioned earlier, we learning communities. And that's true, I think, in the broader forest school community, in my experience, because when I first started to get into forest school, I really looked for conversations about autism. And other than in that book, Forest School for All, I found it really hard to find them.
Okay.
So I kind of went along to my local Forest School Association group and just kind of said, come to the woods with me and talk about autism and stuff. And then I went along to conference and did the same thing. And I found that forest school practitioners are really open to learning new things, to new ideas, very open to the idea of like the neurodiversity paradigm. I've had so much support from the FSA, really. I mean, Sarah Lawful, I have to mention, has just been just massively supportive of all the stuff that me and Andy have done from the beginning. And yeah, it's just building and building. And now there's chats everywhere, isn't there? And there's going to be the SEND conference that we're going to come to with you guys, which is really exciting, because there was a real need, I think, for that. And I think the need's starting to be filled these days in a way that it wasn't, 10 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Andy, I was wondering if you could tell me about what drew you into the world of forest school. I know you said about reading the book, but also just kind of how your experience through Spectrum Gaming and your kind of lived experience has led you to believe that being outside is such a good thing. And I'd love to hear about your forest school sessions that you lead as part of your kind of Spectrum Gaming work.
Yeah, cool. But I think the first reason why I thought it would be amazing is because of how beneficial being outside has been for me. When I'm one of what's known as like a masker. So well, I'm not anymore. I used to be. Now I'm just openly myself to everyone, whether they like it or not. But when I was younger, I was like I said, a masker. So it's the way I used to always describe life. Basically, it's like it feels like you're in a movie, but everyone has the script except you. So everyone sort of knows what's going on, but then you just sort of feel a bit lost and you're trying to fit in, but you don't know where or how. So I used to spend all of my energy just trying to sort of fit in and sort of look like everyone else. But then it was completely exhausting trying my best to do that. So then when I got home at the end of the day, I had nothing left. And all I had to do was try and recover and prepare for the next day. So at that time, I used to escape into the world of books and gaming and that sort of stuff. But as I got older and I became more independent, the one thing that I found the most helpful for me was going on a walk to the woods. So every single night, I used to go on a walk to the local woods with just a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper and a pen. And I just walk through and write down anything that sort of came to my mind while in nature. And I think being able to do that was absolutely sort of, it was just an amazing experience for me basically. The idea of Spectrum Gaming came about while I was walking through the woods. Well, yeah, I say walk. I was actually sat up in a tree at the time, but then I had to walk back out of the woods afterwards. But just having, like Meg said before, having the time and space to sort of enjoy nature and just do whatever you feel like you need to do at that time. I felt like that was just really, really important for me. And I think that transfers over to our forest school sessions as well. So yeah, as I've been running for almost 2 years now, and the way it worked is, well, everyone who attends our forest school is autistic, And since we believe in equal partnership, they sort of design how the sessions run. So we started with
That's
all
awesome.
having a so we started with all having a big group call together. But it started a bit before that, where we did a conference to sort of raise money for Spectrum Gaming. Michael, we're very grateful for Michael coming to speak to help raise money for it as well. And then the young people decided what that money was used for. So we had a call together, and then the young people decided what equipment we would then get to then take to the forest school, as well as deciding how the sessions would run and where the quiet spaces were and that sort of stuff. I mean, it just started from there. And yeah, I think it's been amazing seeing everyone sort of grow and develop over the time that it's been running. And yeah, I just think it's quite incredible, really. I guess that's all there is to it. I don't know, but yeah.
Have you got some of the original kids from 2 years ago still going now, or have you kind of got new groups?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's about almost everyone who originally started does come along to it. But of course, Spectrum Gaming is getting bigger and there's more membership as well. So there's newer young people who we haven't met before who then started to join the sort of tribe, if that makes sense. But it's like a sort of, it is more of like a tight-knit community now. It's really awesome. We have a session for teenagers in the afternoon, and a lot of the time at the moment it's just a case of everyone, they don't really call it forest school, they call it vibing in the woods, where everyone just sort of gets in hammocks together and chats with each other, or they tell stories around the fire or that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's a bit like a, I don't know, it's like a family in a way, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's been amazing to see everyone connect like that. But I guess the interesting thing about that is that for some people, forest school is the only place where that happens. So unfortunately, there's a lot of young people who I mentioned earlier who do sort of struggle to attend school or might not access any other social activities or education. So for some people, forest school is the only place where they feel accepted and comfortable and able to be themselves. And I think it's really amazing that people have the opportunity to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, obviously, I've heard stories about some of the kids that have come to us, and that like the teachers have come to visit while they're in the woods and been like, well, they're completely unrecognizable to how they are in the school, and it's just that's obviously where they need to be, is outside rather than within the school walls. Yeah, so that kind of touched on what I was going to ask about next, which is sounds like your guys' kind of sessions and the work you do is really in demand, which is something we've found down here in Devon. I know that we've got long waiting lists for all our kind of provision for like autistic kids and kids with like EHCPs and things. So I was wondering if we could talk about the barriers to attending groups and how to improve access for these people.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. That's okay. Yeah, I think we speak to our young people in our community about things like this a lot, because it's I think most things, it's quite frustrating when it comes to groups and activities, because the people who need them the most are the people who struggle to access them the most. Like, for example, the easiest way to go to a group or activity for anyone is if they have a friend who also goes to that group or activity. And if you don't have your first friend, then that then makes it almost impossible to actually take that first step. But you know, for us, there's a few things we try to do to try and make that a bit easier. The first one is anyone who wants to come to our forest school is able to have a one-to-one. It's been with me every time, unfortunately for them. But they have a one-to-one with me. It could be on Zoom, it could be face-to-face, and we can show them sort of the forest school area, or we can talk about how it works, so that people do actually know someone before they go along for the first time. The second thing for me, which I think is really important, is young people often feel, but often won't say, that they feel like if they go to a group or activity, they're expected to stay there the whole time. So just letting a young person know it's okay if you go along for 5 minutes and you've had enough, or you don't want to be there anymore. As well as having, for every meetup we ever do, we always have what I call a plan B. So in the woods, we have a quiet area people can go to. Lots of young people have their individual plan for what to do if it gets too much. For one young person, it's going, sitting and doing some carving. For one young person, it's going to a cafe 10 minutes walk away and getting a hot chocolate. But then a lot of people say if they don't have that safety plan in place, their anxiety will be too high to go along in the first place. Going back a few years ago, I ran a board game meetup for autistic adults, and we had what's called a traffic light system, where people have a green, yellow, or red sticker. A green sticker means anyone can talk to you. Yellow means that people can only talk to you if you've spoken to them first. Red means you want no interaction from anyone. everyone who ever went, except one person, always had a green sticker. But as I said, Ben, a lot of people said without the traffic light system in place, they wouldn't have been able to attend, because without the backup option, the anxiety might have been too high. Yeah, and yeah, I think they're the main things for us, which I think have been quite helpful. Oh, one more, which is like I said earlier, one misconception I hate is when people say anxiety is part of autism. It really, really, really isn't. And when people say that, people can be stuck with really difficult anxiety that controls their lives when that shouldn't be something that happens. I believe in distinguishing between rational anxiety and irrational anxiety. So rational anxiety is anxiety as a result of unmet needs, which can be reduced once those needs are met. And then there's the irrational anxiety, which is where you're sort of there, things like phobias or things which can be challenged and overcome with the right support. And typically people assume all of it's part of autism, so that it can't be fixed, or people can go the opposite way and say, actually, all of this anxiety is irrational. We must learn to overcome it, which then means if you have anxiety as a result of an unmet need, which people expect you to overcome while the need is still unmet, that can then make it much, much, much worse. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. The reason why I mentioned that is one of the biggest reasons for anxiety for autistic people is uncertainty. So for me, one thing that's really helpful is having the opportunity to have as much information as possible about something that is happening. If you don't have it, then what happens for me is I try to process every single thing that could possibly happen in a situation so that I can make an escape plan or something to do in case it goes wrong. Imagining all the worst case scenarios and thinking what can fix any of them. The more information you have, the less different options you have to try and process and work out the solutions to. So being able to give as much certainty in advance can be really, really helpful with not making going to something for the first time really overwhelming. For our young people, it's as simple as we have a written document that we send to everyone a few days before each forest school session, and it says sort of, the fire safety rules and that sort of stuff, rather than saying it on the day in the log circle, which is sort of what's typically done, giving young people processing time to look through it all, as well as a list of, activities and things people can do, a list of game ideas which people can suggest if they want to, and then, as I said, just mentioning, it's okay if you want to go early. Every activity is optional. You can take part as little or as much as you like, and we have that on a document that we send to all of our young people, and I think that has really helped people to actually attend as well, if that makes sense. Sorry, a bit of a long answer.
No, that's that one in particular at the end is a really good idea to to give all that information and to answer those kind of unasked questions in advance is a really, really good idea. I run a lot of home education groups, not always for a school, and it's always good to know how we can kind of improve the access that we're offering to make sure that so that's really, really awesome. Thanks. That was a really good list, Andy. Thank you.
I think for me, the barriers, certainly for my groups, the biggest barriers can be because I'm working now with people with higher support needs. So a big barrier can be the attitudes and assumptions of staff.
Okay.
Which if staff are particularly kind of risk averse and things like that, it's actually disabling. It is disabling. I spoke before about the kind of where I was coming from when you asked us to introduce ourselves, and that was so exciting because the locks were getting broken off. That's what it felt like. Do you know what I mean? It felt like the locks were getting broken off, and all these people who'd been very marginalised traditionally were pouring through and sort of getting out into the world, and the world is becoming this bigger place. And Forest School is somewhere that can be very challenging for staff or supporters who have very risk-averse attitudes. What, you're going to go in the woods and give people bill hooks and knives, and there's going to be a big fire. Oh my God. Don't worry, it's risk assessed. I'm first aid trained. Look at all my risk assessments. Look at my insurance. You know what I mean? So we've got all that in place. Don't worry. And but it's a problem I've had actually recently. Some of the people who came was
how do you kind of address that?
Attitudes. In the past, Forest School kind of does it itself. Well, practically, I've been doing it long enough that I can say, well, look, this is my safety record. People aren't chopping them off. We're having a great time. I can't say you'll never get stung by something. You know what I mean? But you can't wrap people up in cotton wool, or they don't have a life. it's disabling. When people come and see how much fun somebody's having, you know, they see everything they're getting from it. They see people, like you said before, there are people who come to see me really struggle in some other environments and are really happy in the woods and are really calm, and their anxiety that they have in other settings just isn't present. And so it can kind of work like that. But sometimes it's really difficult, to be honest. I mean, I've been lucky over the years. I've had loads of staff who are just amazing and really empower the people that they come with and are just such an asset. But post-COVID, I've noticed some services maybe enjoyed lockdown a bit too much, I think.
Okay. Having the
COVID,
excuse to not go out.
yeah. So I think COVID's had a massive effect on forest schools all over the place, actually, that we're only just beginning to kind of get our heads round. I think a lot of young people, certainly who are at secondary school, don't want to go back to school now, who were struggling anyway, but were told you have to go to school, and then they're told for a couple of years, actually, you don't have to go to school now. I think that's had a huge effect, according to people I've spoken to.
Yeah, but down here in Devon, so many people in the home ed community, the numbers are just rocketing with people going, oh, I'm not going back now. I'm not putting them back in after the last 2 years. So yeah, I think it's all over the place.
And this is kind of backs up some of the stuff that Andy was saying earlier about how school can be so difficult for some people, and the fact that, you know, families are going to see all this kind of anxiety and things that we were dealing with when people aren't going into that environment over lockdown. People are much happier, and so I think this is something we're picking our way through at the moment. You know, forest schools are stepping in a lot of places as alternative provision. I think that there's another side to that, though. I think is that sometimes the barrier to someone getting to come and do forest school is, particularly for young people who are getting towards kind of exams age and everything, is the fact that they're doing well at school. So the people, the neurodivergent people, if they're really good at masking and they're doing well academically, they're going to be kept in school. Whereas the kids who can't cope with the classroom at all, who are considered to be disruptive by the schools they're at, often they're the people who will get funding and be encouraged to get more forest school or to leave and get alternative provision and things. And so almost doing well at school can be a barrier. Coping well can act from the point of view of accessing forest school. And those people aren't necessarily, if you talk to people and see the effects that masking can have later on, particularly just after sort of school leaving age and things, you sometimes kind of put in a problem off, I think. And I wonder if some of those guys need forest school maybe just as much as the people who are clearly not coping in the classroom, just because they're doing a better job of holding it down when people you know.
Sounds like there's some big challenges ahead, doesn't it?
There's a lot for everyone to talk about. It's still all kind of landing, isn't it? It's all gone up in the air, and we don't know where it's all landed yet, really. There's always people looking for forest school for children who can't. I mean, a lot of people get in touch with me and I say, well, I don't have any places, but it's always parents looking for something for kids who have really struggled with school.
Yeah. How about you, Andy? Is there quite a lot of demand for it where you are as well?
Yeah, well, ours one's a bit different, where people are invited to join once they're part of the Spectrum Gaming community. And we have 20 places available on both of our sessions that we have, and they're full up every time, basically. So yeah, I'd love for it to be much more forest school around locally, because everyone thrives in it. I think it's desperately needed. But yeah, obviously, since we're national, but we're based in Greater Manchester, people can travel quite far to come to our meetups as well. So, you know, we had meetups over Easter, and people came from like Dorset and Kent and Newcastle to come to Manchester to do the meetups themselves. So yeah, I think it'd be epic if people built enough trust and were comfortable enough to access forest school near them as well. But yeah, we'll see what the future holds, I guess. But yeah,
see what happens. Earlier, Andy, you did mention your kind of one of the misconceptions about anxiety and autism. I was wondering if there's any kind of other like big, I mean, obviously there's quite a few big kind of misconceptions, but like, are there any in particular other ones that you'd like to kind of debunk while we're here and got a captive audience.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, my biggest one by far is that people don't really understand what autism is. You know, it's people know me know I talk about this all the time, but a lot of autistic people are diagnosed sort of when they're struggling or when they're at crisis point. And so those people don't just have traits of autism. People also have traits of anxiety, depression, trauma, and all of these things. And then people learn to sort of combine it into being autism. Most people who start their journey to understanding their autism often aren't just autistic, because you have all these other things as well. And of course, I've been in the autism over quite a long time. And when I have met people, or like myself, when you've recovered from all the negative stuff and then you are just left as just as an autistic person, it's very, very different to how people actually think autism is. When you don't have that chronic anxiety around doing anything or being around people because you're comfortable with yourself and you're able to advocate for yourself and that sort of stuff. When that happens, autism looks very, very, very different. And yeah, I hate how it's always seen as a sort of a negative thing or something to sort of fix, or have a medical model towards it, which is what most local authorities seem to have at the moment, where it's viewed as a negative thing to try and fix and work on and that sort of stuff. The way I see autism is every autistic person has their own unique strengths and their own unique difficulties. And if you focus on your strengths and work out what your difficulties are and put support in place for them, then actually being autistic isn't actually that bad. And yeah, but it's most of the difficulties autistic people face aren't actually as a result of autism. It tends to be as a result of society and people and the environment. Yeah, most of my time now is spent around autistic people, and I have my specific spaces and places in the community where I can be myself. So I have a certain cafe where I go to, where I sit in the same seat every time, and they always know my order. I have a certain running club that I used to go to where I could be accepted. I could talk to people if I wanted to, but if I walked straight in and went on the outskirts, people knew to leave me alone. And it's once you find those places that work for you, where you can be comfortable and happy, then yeah, that's sort of the best way to be. People often focus on that sort of normalization and fitting into the community, but I always say that's a lot of nonsense, and it's about finding a place in the community that works for you. I'm not sure if I've made any sense there, but yeah.
No, it made perfect sense. No, it was awesome kind of explanation. Yeah.
For me, the kind of misconception that I would challenge, I'm not sure it's so much a misconception, but I'd reframe the conversation about Forest School and autism from Forest School is something that's kind of done by neurotypical practitioners for autistic young people. Because that isn't the case for a start.
No.
Like, the Forest School community has always had neurodivergent people at every level of it. I think like the Forest School origin story, I mean, I did my training at Bridgewater, and I was told by one of the trainers, and then I've read it somewhere as well subsequently, that I think very soon after the early years, people came back from Scandinavia with the idea of Forest School. One of the first groups was SEND students from Bridgewater College. So SEND students were part of the origin story of Forest School. So even though a lot of people, who don't know about Forest School associate Forest School with children and young people, actually it's been all sorts of people of all ages from the get-go. When I did groups 10 years ago, I was hearing about people in those groups who'd done Forest School 10 years previously up in the Blackdown Hills. So it wasn't new to the guys, the autistic, they were men at that stage who were coming to that particular group. They knew all about Forest School already. And also Forest School practitioners has always been neurodivergent Forest School practitioners. You're just as likely in some ways to find a neurodivergent Forest School practitioner delivering Forest School to neurotypical children. This kind of, I had a conversation, I think it was last year, with Deb Miller at Haller Wood, and Deb just kind of dropped into conversation. Oh yeah, when I used to do Forest School with Kieran Rose, and I was like, me and the two people who I was with who were both kind of autistic, involved in autistic advocacy and things, we were like, whoa, hang on a minute, Kieran Rose. And Kieran Rose is now kind of famous as the autistic advocate in the And he'd been a forest school practitioner. You know, I don't know Kieran. I think Andy knows Kieran, but that came as absolute news to me. And there's more and more people that I meet, forest school practitioners. There's a lot of late identified women in the forest school community, increasing numbers, sometimes picking it up because then their children are going through diagnoses. Other times it's through kind of forest school and seeing, you know, working with neurodivergent young people at forest school, they kind of suddenly click and go, oh, hang on, I'm identifying with a lot of this stuff. I'm recognizing myself in this. So the forest school community is a neurodiverse community because all our communities are neurodiverse communities. And more now, neurodivergent people are getting the opportunity and the voice within the forest school community. So there's like a lot of the things that I get I get all super geeky and excited when I see things to do with forest school autism. I get all luckily people can't see that if they're listening, can they? I'm shaking my hands about and wobbling, very excited. I am kind of dad dancing. You know what I mean? I'm reaching out and touching the lasers, if you remember those kind of things, if you're as old as me. There's kind of I know, like Stefania Donzelli wrote a really brilliant piece which can be seen on the Forest School Association blog about autistic play in forest school. Everyone should check that out. Fergus Murray comes along and chats in forest school groups. He's a really well-known, very well-respected autistic advocate who's interested in forest school. There's loads of like neurodivergent, not too many for me to mention really, practitioners who are part of the conversation. And there's just it's about to get really, really exciting in the forest school community because we're about to have a really, hopefully, potentially, we could be on the brink of having a really equal, equitable, Andy sometimes uses the phrase neuroharmony, the communities where, do you want to explain that phrase, Andy?
Yeah, so it comes from someone called Peter Vermeulen. I might have said his name wrong, so sorry if I did. But it's about, it's, like I said earlier, it sometimes feels like the world is sort of set up for sort of neurotypical people. But then if you set up a world that's made to meet the needs of just autistic people, that could often be non-inclusive for other people as well, if that makes sense. So the term neuroharmony is about having an environment that has the right level of compromise so that it works for every single neurotype. Yeah, that's it.
No, it's a lovely phrase. And actually, I think I've seen it in the woods, not at sessions that I've led, but at sessions that like my colleagues have led and gone in and seen this amazing group. And there's, home ed group. I mean, I don't know if you guys have worked much in the home ed community, but I'd say it's quite a harmonious. That's the word I was looking for. Kind of place. Like there's a lot of people that home educate because their kids' needs aren't being met in school, and they've seen that they're better out. And so when we have like the home education forest school groups, it's like a real mix of kids there, and it's so lovely to go in and see 20 kids, and if you looked at the register, you'd go, okay, well, half of them are neurodiverse and half of them aren't, but you can just see it just working beautifully, and everyone's having a good time. And as you say, like you might have 2 kids on a hammock doing nothing else all day, and some in the woodwork area, but yeah, it's lovely to see. It'd be really nice if we could see that everywhere, wouldn't it?
I'm very excited at the moment because I think we're just on the cusp of maybe that starting to happen at every level at forest school, throughout the forest school community. And I think it's a big credit to the forest school community how open everyone is to doing that and how willing people are to make that space and to listen to neurodivergent voices. I think that it could get really, really, it's good already. It could get really, really, really good in the next couple of years.
Quite exciting to be part of, isn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like I've stolen quite a lot of your time today, but if there's one thing that you want people to take from our chat, what would you like it to be? Or is there something that you might have wanted to say that you haven't said yet?
Are we allowed to say the F word, Anna?
You can say the F word, I'll let you.
All right, well, the F word for me is fun. And I think that quite often, like always, everywhere really, but all the relational stuff, everything we've talked about, fun is like the magic ingredient at Forest School, and we almost don't want to admit it. You know, we can get into quite earnest chats sometimes, and sometimes I think it's because we don't want to admit how much fun we're having, in case everyone says, "Well, that's not a job, is it?" You know what I mean? But when it's working really well, I mean, lots of stuff in the world of kind of SEND education, social care can, you know, the situations, austerity kicked in, and even previously, can be quite heartbreaking. But actually, our time in the woods with people, it's just so much fun. And that was the thing when I went back to when I talked about at the beginning of my career, when I was around, like seeing Heavy Load play, seeing that whole kind of scene, which Stay Up Late and Gig Buddies came out of. A lot of these things are people coming together. They're brought together by having fun together. When we have fun together, it can bring down all the barriers. It can empower us. It's really just the most amazing thing. And we're almost shy, I think, sometimes to admit it, you know. And it's like, when I think about my career, there's bits of it that have been heartbreaking, but what I'll take away from it when I'm kind of all can't manage it anymore, it's just how much fun I've had, you know. It's how much fun I've had. And I see it at Spectrum Gaming, you know. I find Andy's work so inspiring, because whenever I've sort of been on Zoom meetings or kind of watch videos and stuff with the Spectrum Gaming guys, everyone is just having so much fun. And you see people being empowered, finding the community, really finding the positive sides of themselves. And it's brilliant. So that's what I'd say. Fun. Say the F.
What about you, Andy?
I don't think I can beat that. I think I just completely agree. Yeah, I just love. Yeah, I think not. You know, a lot of young people in our community, particularly because of how the world's set up, can have a lot of struggles and challenges and lots of difficult moments. But then for me, I think sometimes, if despite all that, you can get someone to smile or laugh or bring a bit of a spark back, or you can hear the passion in someone's voice while you're engaged together in something, I don't think anything can top that. So yeah, I think I just have to agree. But yeah.
Awesome, cool. Really quickly, before I let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your evenings or go to bed, depending on how long a day you might have had, I'm just going to ask 3 questions really quickly. And the first is, how do you relax?
I have 2 things. One is going to walk through the woods, and the second one is playing competitive games, because you can just focus on that and start thinking about everything else. That's very weird coming from somebody who loves Forest School, but yeah, I love hardcore, competitive, challenging computer games. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome.
I hang out with my kids. I hang out with my son, is 14. He likes watching loads of kind of comedy and stuff. So I watch comedy with him. He's really into gaming. So he tries to get his dad to do it. So there's a boxing that I have to do, so he can kind of thrash me at this boxing game. I do that with my son. My daughter's really into nature, so we go out into the woods together and we discover stuff. What I found was really good about Forest School is that I think, you know, I've gone into the woods like all my life. You know, I've had periods as an adult where not so much, but like for most of my life, I was always like quite outdoorsy. And Forest School has taught me to have just a massive curiosity in everything to a degree that I didn't used to. And so when I go out with my daughter, the pair of us are like digging around, and like obviously spring's a great time and you're curious because all the flowers are coming out. What's that one? Ooh, you know, what's this one? And kind of, you know, really having good fun. So we went, what are we doing at the moment? We're doing a badger survey together because there's loads of badger sets. She spends half the kids half the time with me and half the time with their mum, who still lives off grid in the woods. So she kind of wanders around eating wild garlic, and we write down. We have to get a what 3 words thing to send to the Somerset Badger group of where the sets are and which ones are being used, and all the tracking the badgers and finding footprints and all that. So yeah, that's what I do to relax.
What are you reading or listening to right now? So podcasts or audiobooks or music, either or.
Mine is nothing. I guess I can say I always listen to music, but I listen to it based on what mood I'm in. So I have like an angry playlist and like a happy playlist and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I'm going to my first concert in about 2 years tomorrow. So I'm going to see someone called Porter Robinson, who does like really like calming, relaxing, like electronic music. So I'm incredibly excited for that. Yeah, I guess that's it. But yeah.
Cool.
Oh, me. Music. I listen to Lisa O'Neill a lot at the moment. I find her very relaxing. And what am I reading? I'm reading a book about Neanderthals. I'm about halfway through and keep dipping into. I'm enjoying that. And I was about to start reading Homage to Catalonia, which I've never read before and always kind of thought I should read. So I'm just about to start that.
And finally, why is being outdoors important to you guys?
I think for me, it's just to escape, and just I don't know, it's just amazing, and I love it, and I don't think I can say much more than that. But yeah,
Awesome.
I'm just of that generation where we all went out when we were kids. I think I'm really lucky. And I was born actually. You wouldn't know it to listen to my voice, but I was born in the Highlands of Scotland, and I can remember my dad like picking up squatting rabbits, out their seat and showing them to us when we were really, really little, and seeing the salmon running up the river and all of that. And then when we moved to England, it was all going into the woods and having camps and having fires, and So I guess the outdoors for me is just. I think this is the thing, isn't it, with forest school? When you make that connection when you're young, the bits, when I was a young adult where I wasn't so involved in going outside, but it's always there and you always come back to it. It's just really sustaining, isn't it, for your life? And so I did kind of live off grid for years and years, like in the woods, whereas I've moved into a flat now, so going to the woods is even more of a treat now. I think that I'm indoors and not just out there all the time. Sometimes it didn't feel like a treat when I was there all the time.
I lived off grid on a boat for a little bit, and it felt like a treat some days. But when we had to run out of water and your water tank had frozen, it was not such a treat then.
I know, yeah. Sometimes when we talk about like the benefits of nature, I think I used to think, when it was like, I used to find it harder when it was really hot. To be honest, how did you find it?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
On the boat, we just open everything, and because you're at the sea, there's always a breeze coming through. I struggled more when all the water froze in the winter and things like that.
See, I was a bit weird. I quite like it when it's really cold. But I do sometimes wonder if the reason that some people sort of, when they talk about nature, they're talking about nature because it's where they go to chill out. Whereas maybe when you're working there and there all the time, it's not always relaxing, is it?
No, not always. But you still go back over and over because just
I think if you've got that connection, it's always there, isn't it? And there's something about it just keeps pulling you back.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you. You too. Lovely to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you guys too. Thanks so much. Another massive thank you to Michael and Andy for joining me this evening. I really enjoyed the conversation and learnt a lot. I hope that everyone out there enjoyed it as well. They mentioned quite a few authors and books and YouTube videos, so I'm going to list all of those resources in the show notes so you can find those if you'd like to check any of them out. Please don't forget to follow them on social media to find out more, and thanks again for listening. Please, as always, give us a like, a subscribe, a share, and I'll see you guys here again in a fortnight for our next conversation. Thanks for listening.